This video is about making this clock. I call it Crazy Clock. This will be the base ring for the clock made out of wenge. I'm going for a fairly heavy base because there's a lot of winding around and I need the base not to fall over. So I'm just going to sand this flat and then I'm going to make a floating bottom out of it. I am going to cut the disc for the floating ring out of this mahogany. So I already turned inside here. The floating disc is going to go on the other side and it'll be deeper than what's left here. This and the scrap ring have already been flattened. So I'm going to glue all three of them together at once. That's just where the glue goes on this one, on that side. Okay, I am back to a 12 segment wedgie sled, and I've got the segment length set at 2.43, which is what I need for the ring above the base ring, and I'm just cutting segments. I'm getting ready to glue the first ring on. I'm going to use the stomper. This is the first ring. It's already set on there. I've got a 5/8 inch hole here for the stomper to go in to make sure everything's centered. But first I'm going to wax the floating ring because I do not want that to stick to the first ring. Okay, ready for glue. Okay, I put 20 pounds on top, which is my cramping force. This is the Crazy Clock base with the first 6-7 rings on. I tend to flatten the ring as I go, maybe 3 or 4 rings on and then flatten it. That's what I'm doing now. Okay, time to glue the next ring on. So the base for the Crazy Clock is done. I went fairly large and heavy so that it wouldn't tip over. I'm gonna start turning on it. I'm only turning the outside. The inside I'm leaving alone because nobody's ever gonna see it. So I'm gonna turn it, sand it, and put finish on it. Then I'll start putting the top on, and that obviously will need a lot more sanding. So now that the Crazy Clock base is mostly together and the elbows are all formed, I can start working on putting pieces together. This is my miniature 1/3 scale model. It's made out of 3/4 inch PVC pipe and elbows, which has about a 1 inch OD. My rings and my elbows are all about 3 inches in diameter, so I'm going to try to make each of these pieces 3 times as long as what's this model showing. So I'm going to glue the first elbow on now. And goes about like that. I'm going to be doing it manually and using quick and thick glue so that it sets very quickly. So using my model, this piece is 4.5 inches long, and it looks about right. So I've got 3.5 inches on the other elbow that's on top of the bowl, and I'm getting about 10 out of this, which is 13.5, which is exactly where I need to be. That's not an accident. Let's put it together to be that way. So I need to glue this part together, getting the orientation correct, and then I'm going to have to figure out how to get it on the lathe and turn it. So I'll video a little bit of the glue up. So I have the first elbow and a couple of rings glued on, and I've got it supported with this one-way bowl stabilizer. I am going to turn to try to get all this flush. So sanding is complete on this down to 600 grit. There will be more sanding on this end of the elbow after I get the next piece on, and it's going to get harder from there on. But looking good so far. So I'm ready to move on to the next step, which is turning down this piece. That's the next piece that's going to go on the crazy clock base. And it'll be running horizontal, but I'm just going to try to turn it, sand it, flip it around, and repeat on the other end so it's ready to glue up. So I am going to glue this piece on here. It's hard to do because this thing isn't real steady, but I'm going to use these rubber bands as clamps. But I'm going to use quick and thick, which sets very quickly anyway. I have 6 3/4 inch thick rings, and I sleddered them up using double-sided tape, and I'm going to flatten them using my drum sander. After I put this first piece on, it looked too long to me, and I tried tightening up the model, and in doing so I realized it's not the 1-inch diameter pipe that's limiting how tight I can get this. It's the elbows, which are 1.3. So I'm changing my scaling factor from 3, which was 3-inch diameter, to 1 inch, to 2.3, which is 3 inch divided by 1.3, which means I need to trim about this much off. So I have this all glued, taped together to check the fit. And this is the most critical part because I want this to be quite close to here because I want to pin a dowel in to support the weight. So as I take this apart, I am going to create some match marks, which is the orientation it has to be glued up in. So I'm going to glue this piece on. I'm going to use quick and thick, hold it for about 20 or 30 seconds, and then try to put a piece of this big blue tape on it to hold it in place, and then sit it so gravity helps it rather than hurts it. I am going to mix up and pour this foaming urethane down through here. I have it to about here from the first pour, and I'll bring it up to here on this one. So I'm going to mix this stuff up. So the next two pieces that are going to go on is this one and this one. And this one was trimmed so that this piece just just touches this. And that's so that I can put a dowel in here to support this weight. So I have this next piece ready to go on the crazy clock, and I've put a 1/2-inch dowel in here to help support the weight with a matching hole, which will hold this end pretty well. And I'm going to use rubber bands to clamp. I'm going to glue it up. So the way I work on how to make this fit is I tape pieces together with the right configuration and then hold it in place. And I had to play around with a lot of different configurations, but I have the final sanding done on this piece, other than obviously this joint that isn't made yet. And I have the foam poured up to this point. I have one more piece to put on. I need to sand this joint, and I've got this finished sanded all the way except for this joint and the surrounding area. And then it will go on like this. So it's time for the final glue up on this piece, at least final from the snake parts. Basically, I got the dowel in here. It fits in the hole and everything fits. So I'm going to put glue on these two ends and then glue it up. Well, this is intended to be the clock face. These aren't glued together yet, but they're taped together so that I have the fit. And I cut these on the miter saw at 7.5 degrees, and you can see it's almost missing a whole segment. Actually missing a hair more. I'm not sure if I'm going to go with this or not, but I am going to try to glue an extra wenge and bloodwood piece to each, and then after gluing together I'll disc sand. They'll be a lot. The disc sanding worked. These two pieces and these two pieces are just a hair wider than the other ones, but it is a crazy clock, and I think I'm going to try to leave it in kind of this shape. But I do need to sand it flat, so that's what I'm going to do now. So the drum sander made it nice and flat. And now I'm going to try to round all these edges and sand up some of the rough spots and see if I can make this shape work. This is my horizontal drilling rig. This is the bottom of the clock, and I'm trying to drill a mating hole for the dowel to go in. Okay, so I've got the crazy clock here, and despite the fact that I intentionally didn't try to get this perfectly vertical, I want the lines on the clock to be vertical, so I'm going to mark it with a level.